always seeing energy around people, and then realizing as I got a little older and started talking about it here and there, people would always have a almost scared look on their face when I would mention things like that, or when I had my first mediumship experience of awakening. But the big event that really made the most drastic shift after that more gradual period of preparation was when I was actually visited by an archangel and taken out of my physical body to the other side.
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where influential conscious leaders come to share the real stories behind their spiritual journey and how they're helping others awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Sat Devbir. He is a spiritual empowerment guide, and you are going to be inspired by his story and the wisdom that he shares. We begin where we often do, back in childhood, where he shares with us about how he began to see energy and spirits from a very early age and how his family responded to him sharing about this. We also hear about an experience that he had with Archangel Metatron that you have to hear. And then I ask him about his name, how he chose to go through the process of changing to a spiritual name and what that means to him and how people reacted in his life. And then we talk about how he, quote unquote, throws himself away in the midst of meditation so that he can be an open vessel, a place of neutrality to serve his clients and ultimately be that channel, that vessel for Source to work with. Now, if you enjoy conversations like this, where we go below the surface, beyond the surface of spirituality, consciousness, mindfulness, you are going to love all of our interviews on Awaken Magazine. And so I would encourage you to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music. Click subscribe, leave a rating or a review, or better yet, share this conversation with a friend. All right, hey, let's dive in to my interview with Sat Devbir. Well, Sat, it is great to have you with us today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward.
Yeah. So from an early age, I know that you have had this ability to connect beyond kind of what we would call the five senses. And so I'm curious about some of your earliest memories of experiencing intuition and your psychic abilities. What are some of those early experiences that you had?
Yeah, so I think the very first memories I have are just seeing energy. And I later learned that this is kind of what babies come out doing, that before they get really sharp vision, they're seeing light, they're seeing our auras and things like that. And I remember that. I think I just maybe kept that instead of having it fade into the background. It just stayed with me. And so that's the first thing I remember, just always seeing energy around people, and then realizing as I got a little older and started talking about it here and there, people would always have a almost scared look on their face when I would mention things like that, or when I had my first mediumship experience of, oh, so and so said to tell you this, but it was someone who had passed before I was born. It was always kind of met with fear. So I learned to sort of keep those things to myself at a very early age too. But it didn't go away, right? It just kind of stayed with me, and then it did end up fading a little bit through my teens and early 20s, but luckily came back. But it was mostly things like that. I would have a few mediumship things here and there, but it was mostly seeing energy and then learning, oh, when someone's energy starts to look like this, when there's, more red maybe, or when their aura starts to shrink in and they're more physically focused, that's a good time to get out of there and go to my room, So it was a lot of stuff like that. Like I really started to learn what certain things meant as I was observing.
Mm-hmm. And Did you share these things early on with your family, like the people that you were, with? Like, and if so, what was their reaction to that?
Yes, it really would kind of just come out of my mouth. And then, as I said, it was met with fear usually. And
They were
so,
fearful. Yeah.
yes, it was like, oh boy, what's going on with this kid? And so, yeah, it kind of became my general experience of growing up. I really felt
Mhm.
like such an alien. But
Mm.
yeah, I think it wasn't that they didn't want to support me or didn't love me. It was just such a foreign thing to them
Right.
that, yeah, that I didn't get a lot of encouragement, that's for sure.
Mhm. I know in 2007, something significant happened in terms of your life. I'd love to maybe go back to that point in time and help us understand a little bit what began to unfold at that point.
Well, it's a beautiful arc, actually, because that's when it became clear why I was having all of those experiences as a child, why my childhood was so traumatic, because I was destined to have this spiritual awakening. And yeah, so around that time, it was basically a lot of the things that I hear from other folks. Suddenly they're interested in their personal development more. Suddenly they start wanting to read autobiography of a yogi and the, Paramahansa Yogananda material. They become interested in meditation. So it was all of those things. I was really just so compelled toward spiritual growth. And I was getting a lot of visions. I started hearing the voice of my higher self, and that was really profound, and it was giving me quite specific instructions as to what to do, when to sit in meditation, noticing all the sensation that was happening when I would sit in that stillness. And so it was a slow build, I would say. During that whole year, it was really just a lot of preparations, and I was driving all over Los Angeles trying to find the crystals I was seeing in my third eye and things like that, and reading a
Was there
lot.
was there something that like triggered it, like a specific where you go, "Yeah, I remember that," or it just kind of began to slowly unfold for you?
Mm. It really was a slow unfolding, and I had this
Mhm.
incredible friend that I had met through this spiritual group that I realized later I was really involved in, mostly because of the service aspect. We would build houses with Habitat for Humanity and things like that. But I owe a lot to that friend because I feel like his role in my life was to kind of wake me up. And there were just certain things that we would organically start talking about that really piqued my interest. And so I do have to credit him for kind of playing a part in that
Mhm.
I think that's important to name because a lot of people have this experience too, and we don't always know what to do with it when someone comes into our life that challenges our worldview, and we get really curious about who they are and how they became that way, and it almost feels a little dangerous. So yeah, I really encourage people to lean in when you have an experience like that because it can really be an incredible gift from the divine. And that's what it was for me. So there was definitely that piece, and then some slow, steady preparation. And then it was a little more like, all right, now go take this yoga and meditation teacher training, and now go to India and go to Egypt. And so I was getting nudges to visit certain temples in the world and different vortex sites. And so, yeah, it was a really amazing time of awakening. But the big event that really made the most drastic shift after that more gradual period of preparation was when I was actually visited by an archangel and taken out of my physical body to the other side.
Wow, okay, you can't just, like, drop us. That's, like, one sentence, you know? Like, like, what were the surroundings? Were you asleep? Were you meditating? Like, take us through the whole experience.
Mm, I was meditating, yes, and I had been experiencing a lot of chills running up and down my spine in meditation in general, and I didn't know at that time that that was my kundalini energy activating, and a lot of my dormant spiritual memory and consciousness waking up. And that night, it was particularly intense. Just the chills running up and down my spine was very intense. And I had started seeing this purple orb kind of up in the ceilings from the time that I was really young. I had this, like, I could physically see this purple orb, and we would have this telepathic communication. And I always kind of called it God because I didn't know what else it could be. It felt so warm and loving and wise, and I hadn't really seen it for a while until I came back into that meditation practice. I mean, started a meditation practice, but I didn't realize as a kid I was actually meditating too. I just didn't have the language for it at that time. But when I really started doing that, I saw the orb again, but that night it showed up and it was huge. It took up the majority of the living room, and then out of the orb presents this huge archangel. And before I could even think, I remember I did consciously blink to make sure that I wasn't just having an inner vision, but I was
So
actually,
your eyes were open.
my eyes were open at that point. Yeah. And because I had felt the presence when the orb came in, I had felt the presence, and I opened my eyes and I was like, oh, this is so familiar, but it's like massive. And so I had a little bit of intrigue, and then the archangel came out, and before I could block myself by thinking about it too much, I was out. And mind you, at that point, I had no idea that there was such a thing as an astral body, but later I learned that's what happened. He pulled my astral body out of my physical body, but in a way that I had no awareness of my physical body for 20, 30 minutes. And within that linear timeline in our system of measuring time, we covered a lot of ground. We went all the way back to the beginning of the creation and to the report station where the souls come to prepare for human incarnations, and where they go after they leave an incarnation to review, and so many classrooms. And it was just, yeah, I mean, all the dimensions of consciousness were revealed to me. Yeah, the nature of the omniverse, many, many universes within the omniverse, and just how tiny the earth felt, in that context. And whoa, it was definitely a lot.
And how many years ago was this from this point in time right now?
I mean, that was 2008. That was like in the beginning of 2008. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's been an interesting journey since then. As you
So you have this experience. What do you do after that? Do you tell this friend of yours? Like, how do you integrate that experience?
Mm, yes, it was so interesting, and it was so unexpected. It was so intense in the aftermath because it had also revealed all of the distortions in our collective consciousness. And so the biggest thing that I remember when I think back to that time was the grief. It was a good 6 months of grieving that all the things I had been told through religion, through assumptions we have collectively about reality, are just so deeply distorted, and so saturated in fear and manipulation. And so it was a lot of grief, but at the
Mm.
same time I had the leverage of, like, that was also amazing. Like, wow. And so I was trying to integrate the incredible access that I had, and everything that I had seen, and all of that beauty and understanding and memory flooding back to me, while also on the human side kind of grieving all the things and all the distortions and whatnot. So I actually didn't tell anyone for a long time. I was already teaching. Maybe a year and a half later, I had started teaching a regular yoga class. And one of my students came in, and at some point, I think not too long, maybe a few classes in, I was just talking to her about something, and she was kind of looking at my crown chakra, and she said, Metatron. And I was like, how does she know that? Because that was the archangel that came and took me to the other side. And she brought me a statue of him, and she brought me his cube, his sacred geometry. And so she was another angel on the path. And even then, I was kind of like, I don't think I'm ready to talk about this, but it's really cool that someone else can see it.
Wow.
And she said she was literally guided. She's a very psychic person too. And she said she was literally guided to my yoga studio and my class of all the teachers on the roster, 25, 30 teachers on the roster. And she was guided to the exact place. And she lived in Redondo Beach. Like it was wild, not very convenient for her, but she was up for following the guidance. So that was really cool. So that was like a little bit that kind of warmed me up to then eventually sharing it. But I don't even remember. I think it was maybe at least 3 years later before I started to talk about it at all.
Hmm. Hmm. What was that transition like for you to focus on being a vessel of service as a spiritual guide, a coach, a teacher? I know that all those titles don't really, fully embrace all that my guess is that you do, but you know what I'm talking about. You're bringing your service to the table. What was that process like for you in terms of making that a full-time focus?
Mm. I feel like I was very blessed in certain ways because that slow, steady preparation set me up in a way that I could start sharing pretty early on. And that deep connection that I first had was with the crystals. And so I was working with these crystals, and I was working with my own chakras, and I was feeling so good. I was getting some really incredible results in the way that I was guided to work with them. So I started inviting friends in, say like, hey, just tell me if you're open to this, and I'd be curious to know how you experience this energy in this work. Mind you, this was not at all my lane before then. I was working in the sales department of a luxury hotel. So yeah, so it was cool that I had some folks in my world who would even be open to it, but everyone was blown away. And so I kind of laid this foundation by just sharing out of curiosity. And then before I knew it, friends were referring their friends, and people were coming to me for these healing sessions. And so it really had an organic way of opening up in that respect. But then it took about 3 years to integrate things, get a little more educated. I kind of lined up in this miraculous way with a secret society mystery school, and I got a lot of tools there for my own spiritual hygiene and kind of navigating life as a deeply empathic, highly sensitive person, as all of that opened up, which I didn't really know about myself before then or acknowledge before then. So yeah, so during those 3 years, I was like, I was still in my day job, but then I was teaching these yoga classes at night and doing the healing sessions in the evenings and on the weekends. And it was kind of like, when am I going to be released from this other world? And I would get really impatient. So I really empathize with folks who are in that liminal space too. And they're like, oh, when can I just live my purpose, or kind of be full on in my higher destiny? Because I definitely had that impatience come up, and a knowing that I didn't have a desire to go further in that career path. But I had to also take into consideration the 3D world, and give myself time to integrate and still be able to pay my bills and that kind of thing. So yeah, so it was a solid 3 years that I was learning but also practicing and kind of making that transition. And it was actually January 2012, after the big 11-11-11 alignment, November 11, 2011, that was the catalyst that just turned everything upside down. And I left my home, I left my relationship, I left my job by that following January. And then it was just full on. And it was really incredible to then get involved with the yoga teacher training and later create some of my own programs and the online university and all the different things. So I became a junkie of just soaking it all up, educating myself, seeking out the best mentors around the world and teachers and gurus and guides and all of that. And yeah, that was just, I'm still like that. I'm still just insatiable in terms of wisdom, just really wanting to pull in all the wisdom and energy I can so that I can pass it along.
Hmm. Now, over a decade later, I'm curious about the types of individuals that you most often help. Is there a typical presenting problem or challenge that the people that you work with come to the table with? Um, is there a certain type, or is it just across the board? Anybody who's kind of trying to find their way in life and spirituality?
Mm. What I notice is one of my specialties is being able to tune into the person's higher self and sort of jump back up to the report station and even tune in sometimes to what was happening pre incarnation for them and what lessons they were seeking to learn. And that tends to match up with the crisis they might be experiencing or the trauma that they've been wrestling with that brings them to my door. And so, yeah, it can look like a lot of different things, right? Maybe they had a breakup, maybe they have a serious illness, maybe they're at their wits' end because they can't seem to resolve this trauma that they've been trying to heal their whole lives. So there can be a lot of different symptoms, but what I find they have in common is that there's a reason for all of these things. And I can usually get to the bottom of how those events are meant to be catalysts for their own spiritual evolution. And so we can do a lot of healing and a lot of resolving of that trauma. And I can get in there and kind of work with things that maybe weren't time stamped. And so the triggers are just active on a daily basis. And, we get a little metaphysical sometimes too in that respect, and just the way we're working with the brain and consciousness and the nervous system. So yeah, it can definitely be a lot of different things, but it's usually then me kind of recognizing this is why this is presenting. So let's do it. Let's get to the bottom of it and let's allow it to be the catalyst that it was designed to be, to empower you, not to hold you back.
Hmm. A tagline that you have prominently on your website is everything is an inside job. And so I'm curious what that statement means to you and how does it inform your work with your clients?
Mm, yes. We're so indoctrinated into the extrinsic, right? If I just get that partner, or if I just get that job, or if I just manifest this next thing, then I'll finally be okay. Then I'll finally be happy. Then I'll finally be at peace. And I really, through experience and my own personal experience, have learned that it's not about getting that next thing. It's about looking at why you're desiring that thing in the first place. What is that going to give you? And usually it all comes down to safety. I only want to buy that big house because I'm going to feel more safe. I only want that fancy car because I feel like it's going to get me attention, love, validation. And why do I want that? So I can feel good, so I can feel safe. So we really look at how we can come back to wholeness and heal whatever core wound is driving the desire to prove or whatever in the outer world. And it's just such a beautiful process to see folks coming back into that experience of wholeness within themselves. So, yeah, I truly believe it's never about what we're doing out there. And we see people kind of avoiding doing their own inner work by being of service and going to Africa every year. And that's beautiful. Please keep doing the philanthropy, but not in a way that's self abandoning, right? We want to first start here and heal our own wounds. It's that overused metaphor, like put your life jacket on first, right?
Yeah, very powerful. One of the things that you write, you say the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with your own soul. Be loyal to it above all else. What does that mean to be loyal to our own soul?
Yes. So that was actually one of the core teachings of Metatron. After that initial experience of him taking me to the other side, then day by day, every single day, there was a new ascended master or archangel coming to introduce themselves to me and introduce their energy signature to me. And so I've collected a lot of these teachings, but that's one of his core teachings. And feeling his presence coming in. Sorry, we get hijacked sometimes, but it's a beautiful thing. Uh, yeah, it's such an emotional experience to come back to some of those core teachings for sure. Hmm.
Loyal to your own soul. Yeah.
Yeah, he uses the word fidelity, which also made me really emotional at first because I had only heard that in the context of like married people, fidelity
Right.
versus infidelity. And yeah, there's just something in this one. I'm really happy you asked, and I'm getting to it here. But yeah, it's such a big experience. But fidelity to your own soul, the way that he puts it is, we can have loyalty to our lovers, loyalty to our teachers, loyalty to our communities, and most of us are really adverse to the moment when that energy exchange could be completed, and we might be called to move on to a new role, a new spiritual community, a new teacher, a new awakening, a new iteration of self. And if we have this loyalty, even to dreams that are no longer relevant, maybe, right? I've had so many dreams that I was like, oh, you know what? I don't need to be a famous songwriter, and I don't need to master playing the saxophone. Like there were so many big dreams I had at different ages and stages. And in the fidelity to my own soul, I knew when to let those things go. I knew when to let certain experiences, certain relationships go so that I could stay on track to my soul's most profound evolution, which was
Hmm.
so clear to me that it's the only reason why we're here in these human bodies, is to evolve our own souls. This physical experience gives us the opportunity to add so much spiritual mass to the eternal self. And so, if we have fidelity to that first and foremost, the entire reason that we're even here is not to sacrifice for everybody else, not to cheer on your best friend your whole life or whatever, but do that, of course. But if that's where your loyalty is, above the loyalty to your own soul, above that soul fidelity, it's going to get a little crunchy, and there will be discomfort, there will be stagnation, there will be blockages in your spiritual growth and what's possible in your higher destiny. So
Hmm.
that's what we're really talking about there.
Hmm. How do I differentiate between, um, wow, I feel like for me to choose this path would be selfish. Like it just feels so like this is all about me and not taking into account whoever the other people are in my life. Okay, that feels selfish. Or how do I differentiate between what I'm feeling called to and what the expectations of others are upon me? How do I differentiate that? Maybe the thing that they're suggesting actually is in my best interest. Maybe they do know better. Maybe I'm blind to, and what I'm wanting right now is not help. Like how do I differentiate between all of that?
Mm, yes, this is where self attunement is so important, so that we know that those whispers from the soul really are whispers from the soul. And we can't cultivate that level of self attunement to trust that voice unless we're creating space to nurture that relationship with the soul. We have to take that time in stillness. We have to starve the mind of information, even when it's desperate for that next dopamine hit from social media or whatever. We have to create that space to be in soul fidelity by showing up like any other relationship to nurture that connection. And from there, it's a lot easier to trust the path, because if we actually are aligned and self-attuned and we've cultivated that connection with the soul, everything that the soul calls us toward will be in highest service to everyone. It was like that relationship that ended through that awakening process and that transitional part of my life. That person went on to create all this magical art, and it was just like so much happened, and it was of course excruciating and sad, and so much in the messy middle that I could have definitely said, maybe I'm off track here, maybe I've lost it, why would I be giving up this beautiful relationship, etc., etc. But wow, it all panned out, and I got to watch the evidence of how both of us thrived in our own lanes, and we got to bow to each other that part of our energy exchange was complete, but we would always have this magnificent soul level love and this connection that could never be taken away from us. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that can happen. But most people don't cultivate that level of trust in their soul, in their intuition, and they don't cultivate that level of self attunement to be able to know that they can trust that voice, that those whispers aren't just the ego wanting something else, or being misguided. So it's nuanced, and it's more work than a lot of folks want to put in.
Hmm. One of the big things that we focus on in terms of the spiritual development world or spirituality is mindset. I mean, it is like that is it seems like the top layer, for busy kind of how are you thinking? What is your mindset like? And one of the things that you talk about is instead of obsessing over positive or negative thinking, focus on useful thinking. So I'm curious what you would say, or how would you describe what is useful thinking and how do I cultivate that?
Mm. I love this one. Most of the ethos of the teachings revolve around messages from my guides, but this one is actually from NLP. It's one of the presuppositions of neurolinguistic programming, and it just lit up. The first time I read that one, I was like, yes, because Metatron had given me different teachings on this too. I'll never forget the first time that he was just so frank about our thoughts. And he's like, you can pick your thoughts, right? If you start to notice that the pattern is not useful, you can pick a new thought that's more useful. And so it really kind of fit with that message that I had received from him a couple years prior. And that's really what I'm talking about. I am all for exploring every message that emerges. I'm not about spiritual bypass or anything like that. So that's not what I'm talking about with this. I think that can be really dangerous. The toxic positivity, law of attraction has people like so afraid to ever acknowledge they might be having a negative thought or anger or whatever. And I really encourage folks to trust that those things will resolve themselves if we just allow them to. So it's not that, but sometimes we catch ourselves in those negative thought patterns that are usually related to an overactive nervous system, right? Being in the sympathetic nervous system. Literally, when I see people go into that mode, their auras disappear because their body's consuming that consciousness to fight or flight, whatever the perceived threat is. And so you lose all of this energy that's normally connecting you to higher thought forms, more useful thought forms, connecting you to your guides, your higher self, right? All that wisdom, the superconscious mind, all of that is not prioritized if we're in a fight or flight mode. So usually that's what's happening. So while you're maybe finding ways to regulate your nervous system so that you can allow higher level thoughts to come back in, it can be really helpful to just immediately cut off those unuseful thoughts of like, you're unworthy, you're never going to make it, no one cares. Just those really intense inner critic thoughts that can come up. They really aren't useful. I'm a parts work guy, so I love working with people and helping them to understand what those voices really mean. They're usually just protecting us from something, right? From disappointment or whatever. But I think that, kind of like CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, teaches, sometimes we need to set boundaries with our own thoughts. We need to set boundaries with our own parts. We can't just let those kinds of thoughts take up all the space. So that's what I mean about unuseful thoughts versus useful thoughts. What would be a more useful thought than, I only got 2 likes on my post, no one cares, I'm never going to be successful? Like, maybe there's a more useful thought that we can bring in place of that without spiritually bypassing, but just saying, what would a more useful thought be? Could I come back to my creativity? Could I come back to, who were those 2 people? How cool, right? that they liked it. Like, there are so many ways that we can get ourselves into a more useful thought process. And then, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I don't want to leave out the somatic piece, because we're really focused on, mindset and educating the mind, but we forget to educate the heart. And then we're walking around with a lot of illiteracy emotionally. And we want emotionally intelligent people and people who are also connected to their heart wisdom to bring that coherence through the entire chakra system, essentially, but particularly those 3 points of the navel as it connects to our emotional body, the heart as it connects to the intelligence there, and then the most balanced use of the mind. And ideally, we train the mind to serve the soul.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned this regarding the social media posts with 2 likes. We have a lot of people that watch our show or listen to the podcast who are, perhaps beginning their journey as a conscious leader, healer, or coach, or they're putting out content into the world. You've been doing this for quite some time, and I'm curious how you navigate this deep connection to source consciousness, this deep commitment to your own spiritual, personal health, combined with, you got to promote your work. You got to get the message out there. And it means being courageous to post on social media or YouTube or websites. How do you navigate that? Like, those layers and all that that can bring up for any of us.
Mm. It's definitely a work in progress and can be a point of frustration at times, I'll be honest. And for the most part, I love I love any creative channel that I can kind of pour my creativity into. And so for me, there are components of it that are really fun. I like doing photography. I like sharing things that I feel passionate about or that were epiphanies for me. I like beautiful images. The guides even talk about how powerful images are. So I always incorporate kind of dreamy celestial images alongside more educational videos and quotes and things. So I really like mix up the content that I put out, and I just make it really about sharing the things that help me and sharing the things that I love and that kind of blew my mind. And then it's really fun. So there's that side of it that makes social media a little bit more fun, and also just the mindfulness around it. Like, I'm not going to spend too much time scrolling. I've already gone down the road of compare and despair and learned those aren't useful thoughts, right? And so it's using it responsibly, not using it for the dopamine rush, not using it to compare and despair, but like doing a balanced level of supporting other folks that I really love by liking and commenting on their things and just cultivating a really positive space on there, and creating more community, and using the tool wisely like we would want to use any tool.
Hmm. Uh, as I interview so many people and engage with so many people in the spirituality space, I do find that there are individuals who come to a place where they feel like there is a desire, a need, or even a calling to shift the name that they utilize online or in healing spaces. And so I'm very curious about your name and how that came about for you. Would you mind sharing kind of the backstory and then even the meaning behind your name?
Oh, absolutely. It's so funny because, yeah, I've had this little creative rush recently, and I've been writing a lot of poetry, and then reconnected with some of my creative partners in the music world, and we've been producing these beautiful songs from my writing, and one of them is called "I Used to Be Jacob." So that was my birth name, and and yeah, it was kind of fun to revisit that, and there was just a natural evolution in the yoga community of noticing that a lot of people were receiving these spiritual names from this woman who has this capacity to connect to your higher destiny. And I got really curious about that. And so I kind of went through the steps to inquire about it. And when it came back, it felt so perfect, just intuitively. And
Did you meet with her in person or was this more of like an online experience or take us through it?
oh yes, no, it was just literally online, and you provide very little detail, and yeah, she just has the capacity to tune in,
Yeah.
and she really nailed it, because later I learned that your spiritual name is supposed to be your direction, almost like your north node in astrology. That
Hmm.
sometimes your birth name is more tied to your ego and more tied to fate and the cards that you were dealt, incarnating into that particular family and culture and part of the world and so on. But at some point, you might need to take on a new name that represents who you're becoming, that represents your higher destiny. And then every time someone addresses you by that name, that higher destiny is reinforced. So Sat is truth. Many people know from Sanskrit that Sat is truth. And before I even received this name, I started to say, after that awakening in that little zone, uh, I started to say, you know what? Truth is my religion. And I started to tune into religio. The Latin root is return to origin. So it's like, what is going to return me to my true origin, to my true essence, more than truth itself? And so when I saw that the first part of my name was Sut, I was like, wow, truth, amazing. And then Devbir, Dev is like divine, angelic, and Bir is bravery. So essentially, my name means truth and divine bravery. And that really spoke to what I was living into, to my process of becoming, because I was such a shy child, and I felt like I always had to be so withholding and cautious about what I shared, what I saw, who I was. So many layers. I didn't feel all that brave. And so that was really beautiful to step into the light of truth and divine bravery, not just bravery in like a hero's journey way, but a spiritual bravery, and a bravery that's based in truth. That was really, really powerful and impactful. So yeah, it's felt very natural.
And what was that like once you received it back? Like, what was your process internally? Was it immediate? Like, okay, I'm going to start utilizing this name. Did you change your legal name or did it take time? How did your family like, feel about it? Like, I'm just curious, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was a whole thing. My family for a while was like, I could tell they were doing their best to trust the process, but they were also like, what is he up to? Like, this is a pretty drastic change. And definitely other people were pretty provoked. People in my family who are more religious were definitely, I could feel them. That was an interesting social experiment for me too, to feel them so palpably threatened by my expansion. And even when I would use words like expansion, I could see the fear in their eyes, like, no, don't go outside of this box. And I just found it all very amusing. And so, yeah, my name was definitely one of the ways that I affirmed this shift and that I embodied that new identity. And it really helped people to take me seriously, right? I changed the way that I dressed. I changed the way that I spoke. I changed my name. On social media and the way I introduced myself. So yeah, it was definitely a moment for the people around me to adjust, and certain people fell away. But what was really interesting about that too was when they started to come back around, it was with really deep things. When life started to present big challenges for people, I was the person that they felt that they could come to with those things that I don't know would have necessarily been the case prior to that big shift in my life. And so yeah, I think that the name really worked in establishing my new trajectory.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really amazing. Yeah. I'm curious about this concept of neutrality and how you function as a guide. And yet it seems like there's this emphasis or importance on remaining neutral as a conduit or a channel for source to flow through you in working with your clients. How do you cultivate that neutrality in your life?
Mm. Yes, my one of my secrets, one of my life hacks for this, I'm gonna give it away, everybody, is every morning the first thing I do when I sit to meditate each morning is I declare that I am the silence, that I am the nothingness. And there's nothing sweeter to me than throwing myself away. And this really started in one of the teacher trainings. Probably the teacher training, the first one I took in Los Angeles, but then it deepened in the one that I took in India, where it was emphasized even more that we have to be the vessel. And whatever is going on for us personally, if you sit down to teach or you sit down to hold space for someone else, you begin a healing session, a coaching session, whatever the context, you got to set your stuff down. You got to leave your baggage at the door and become the vessel. And I really started to tune into that even with my guides, that if I'm going to be an unbiased guide and support system for other people to access their highest truths and clarity and healing, that I can't be injecting myself into the mix. And so through the meditation practices, through the experimentation of throwing myself away again and again and again, I started to become known for that. People would always comment on how neutral I am and how I can literally hold space for anything. There's not really any shadow that's too big to reveal to me, and I welcome it. And that's such a beautiful experience for me, but also for the people I work with, to have that safety and know that that container will be held in that way.
hmm One of the ways that you work with people is through a one on one program called Self Attunement, which you've referenced, the need for self attunement.
Mm.
So I'm curious about how that experience, what that experience is like with you. Like, how many weeks is it? What modalities are you integrating? What is the point of self attunement?
Mm. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So the two programs that I've been working for years now, the Easy program and the Release program, it's 4 sessions or 7 sessions. Those I started to notice were getting automatically modified as folks would sign up for them. There's a lot of more metaphysical components where we're doing DNA activation, we're laying down people's divine DNA blueprints, we're doing a lot of higher self work, generational trauma, and like there's a lot of stuff in there that was a little bit more on the deeply spiritual or even metaphysical side of things. And as the work has progressed and as things have deepened, I noticed that the thing that everybody really needed the most was to work with the rooting first. How do we get grounded? How do we create safety in the soma and the physical body so that the work we do on the cognitive level actually sticks and integrates? So there was this natural evolution of creating this new program, the self attunement program, where we focus on first the grounding and really working the nervous system, doing the vagal toning, nervous system regulation tools, all of that, so that then when we go up and we work that vertical axis, right, root to rise kind of experience, then when we go up and we touch into this wisdom of the person's higher self and the soul, and I'll get those images of them at the report station shopping for traumas and shopping for traumatic relationships and all of that, and we're then bringing that down, and we're able to integrate, this is what my soul wanted to learn, so how can I take this information or even take this light and consciousness and wisdom of my higher self and apply it in the way that I'm navigating my work, my parenting, my partnership, my just everyday stuff, my stress levels. We're really working that vertical angle, and then also the horizontal angle of, am I able to keep one eye in on myself when circumstantially there's chaos in this horizontal world, in my relationships, in dynamics, communities, and so on? Am I self-attuned enough to always keep one eye in on me so that I can be more revealed in my needs and where I'm at, which is the formula for so many points of success, in relationships. Intimacy is what creates meaning. So we have to have enough self-attunement to let people in to how we're actually feeling, which means we have to know how we're actually feeling if we're going to let anybody else in on that. And so it creates that vulnerability to build the intimacy, to build the meaning in our relationships and strengthen those bonds, which is such a core component of life, right? So on a relational level, I see the self-attunement program bringing people first into that relationship with themselves, understanding what that soul fidelity feels like, just really building all of that so that they can have better boundaries, because essentially a boundary is just communicating a need. But how do you know what your needs are if you haven't attuned to yourself? And so we save them the headache of chasing all these big dreams or trying to prove something if maybe that's not even relevant to the soul's intention for this lifetime. We need that self-attunement first. What actually matters to me? What do I value? If you're listening to this right now, you can jot down answers to these questions. What do I value the most in my life? My top 5 things. What are the things in life that are most important to me? And if you say something like having quality time with my family, but you're working 80 hours a week, then you got some work to do there, right? If that's more important to you than whatever paycheck or whatever the work is giving you, then you got some work to do. So it's things like that, and then we can just keep going and going and going, because it really is that self-attunement that helps us understand ourselves, what we're here to do, how we're here to serve, what we're here to learn. All the things come together, and there's nothing like creating that congruence between the inside and the outside. Self-attunement will make it impossible for you to keep performing and keep wearing the mask and keep saying yes when it's a no and keep smiling when your heart is breaking. When you're that attuned to yourself, you're compelled to be more authentic. You're compelled to have that congruence between the inside and the outside. And in that
Mm.
authenticity, you magnetize all the things that are actually for you and not for the mask you're wearing.
Hmm.
So this
Beautiful.
yeah, this program has been so life changing. I'm sure y'all can feel it as I describe some of the things that I've seen already. This is one of my newer programs, but it's been such a powerful breakthrough experience for so many people, and it's just such a beautiful honor to be a guide in that way.
Wonderful. How many weeks is the program? What does it include a bit?
So there's two options. You can kind of do I think it's a 6 week or an 8 week, if I remember right. It's maybe over 3 months or over 4 months, and yeah, so we're basically tuning in together either in person or over Zoom. I have folks from all over the world, so there's a lot of Zoom meetings and whatnot. So we take a couple of hours usually in those sessions. Like it's if the person has the time, we'll take a couple of hours in each one of the sessions to really go deep, and then in between you might have some homework or some practices that'll help you kind of integrate and regulate. And folks can reach out to me in between when they bump up against something, and so it's just a really beautiful supportive container where we have some deep dives together and then support in between as well.
Wonderful. I know you also have a online program called Mansion of the Heart University, where you have multiple online courses where people can access those from anywhere in the world as well. Who would benefit from those courses? Maybe just give us a brief taste of that.
Oof. Well, yes, the most popular one is the parts work course, and I'm really passionate about the parts work because I've seen so much transformation, and it's really just yeah, we've all done it. We've all said, "Oh, there's a part of me that really wants this, but a part of me that prefers that." And that's parts work. It's like, who's it going to be? And a lot of our parts are polarized. The one that's saying, "Yeah, go for it. Just be free, be radically authentic." And then the protector part is like, "No way, don't you dare do that. That's too big. That's too bold. It's only going to end in criticism and rejection." And so, right, as we wrestle with these polarized parts and start to understand what each one is doing in service to the self, there's so much opportunity to go beyond our blocks. So I just help people kind of understand the inner critic voice more, and what its positive intention is for them, what the exile voices sound like. It can be really hard to access those parts of ourselves that we've hidden away and pushed in the shadows because they didn't feel welcome in our communities or our family units or whatever. And so to reintegrate all these parts in their most suitable roles is really, really healing. And as Carl Jung says, the soul isn't seeking to be perfect or totally purified, it's just seeking to be whole. And that always deeply resonated with me. And so through the parts work, we can do that. We can integrate all these various parts so they're no longer polarized and creating all this internal conflict. And that's just I'll stop myself because I can go on and on about the parts work, but it's such a rich course. So yeah, that's the most popular one, and that's for everybody, right? Like we all have these various parts, and anything that you're potentially struggling with, you can trace back to some of these parts that have maybe been holding wounds for a really long time, or have felt like they always had to be the caretaker or this or that. And you get tools to unblend from those parts and really live as yourself. And just the last thing I'll say on this is like a little nugget that I'm giving away because I love you guys. Is the core tell of how much time you're spending as a part versus as the self is that your self energy will always be a loving, wise, compassionate presence. So anytime you're experiencing anything other than a loving, wise, compassionate presence, there's a part that's in leadership. You are no longer in leadership in those moments. So once you know that, it's really easy to identify when you're blended and a part has come into the driver's seat that's posing as you and making choices for you and speaking for you. It's not the best way to go through life, right? So we really teach people how to get back into their self energy and cultivate that self leadership, which also helps with the self attunement. So that's a really amazing course. And then yeah, for folks that are wanting to go deeper with the self attunement in terms of cultivating their intuition, that's the second most popular course in the intuitive development course. These are all just on demand, and I'm really candid. And there was like a live group when they were originally happening, and so you get me and tears and joy and all the things, and I'm just really unhinged and with everybody so deeply in those experiences. And then just quickly, it feels important to name the Mother Father Wounds course too. It's just a 2-part course. It's not quite as long as the others, but there's so much in our assumptions about women in general based on our experiences with our mothers, and our assumptions about men in general based on our experiences with our fathers or our caregivers in those various roles. And so that one is really deep too. I highly recommend folks to check out the Mother Father Wounds. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. And of course, we'll link to the Mansion of the Heart University. I know you've got a new YouTube channel coming out for Mansion of the Heart. And so we'll link to that as well. And I do know it seems like, I don't want to speak for you, but one easy place for people to start could be the Tuesday meditation. I know you have a group meditation every Tuesday. Is that right?
Yes, and building community is so important to me. I always want to make time to build community. And so the Tuesday night sessions are just drop in by donation, show up as you are, and we'll do some movement and we'll do some meditating, and I'll incorporate breath work here and there, beautiful music I'm creating and others are creating, spiritual music and whatnot. And deep Dharma talks I'll always open with really deep personal spiritual growth topics. So it's something you can kind of take in that way as well. So we'll kind of start with giving the mind some food for thought, and then we'll work everything through the body and find that place where we can then come to stillness and a deep meditation at the end and a nice integration relaxation. So it's a really, really sweet community. Please join us.
Wonderful. All right. Where can people find you online and connect?
So satdevbir.com, that's the perfect place to start. And that will also link you over to mansionoftheheartuniversity.com. And those are the two primary sites where you can connect, and lots of various ways to learn more and be involved. And then Instagram is a great option too, at Sat Devbir on Instagram.
Awesome. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom. I know people are going to walk away from this conversation feeling the richness of your contribution to our world and the depth that you're bringing, and just appreciate all that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's beautiful to be in this together.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.